Please welcome to the stage Axios political reporter Hans Nichols.
Good morning. Thank you. That's a nice introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hans Nichols. I am a reporter at Axios. I am the co-author of a newsletter called Axios Hill Leaders. Some of my other better co-authors are backstage. Our goal this summer, our summer recess goal, is to get it into your inboxes by 7:30. If it lands later than that, as always, blame our editor, Justin Green. His fault, not ours. Before I begin, actually, if you're following at home along the live stream, Axios hashtag, let me see here. It's Axios Live is the hashtag. Also want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Bank of America, who makes this all possible. And I'm going to welcome up my guest, Majority Whip Tom Emmer. I've had a lot of private conversations with Tom Emmer, not a lot. Sometimes they're over a glass of wine. He tells great fishing stories. Please welcome the great Minnesota fisherman, Tom Emmer. Good to see you.
Thank you, Hans.
So do you want to start with crypto or Epstein?
What's the difference?
Yeah. We'll do Epstein later. Let's start with crypto because you had a big week. 1 for 3. One of the bills passed. How are you going to get the other 2 across the line, and what's the strategy?
Well, I think it was 3 for 3, and it was a great week. And again, Hans, great to see you. Great to be here, and great to see everybody who showed up this morning. The Genius Act passed, obviously, out of the Senate to the House. So out of the 3, and remember, Tim Scott, you got to give Tim Scott, Bill Hagerty, Cynthia Lummis, everybody on the Senate Banking Committee, especially on the Republican side, but I'm not going to discount some of the Democrats that are on that committee, because they hadn't marked up a bill, I don't think, since 2019.
Right.
And they not only put this Genius Act together, but they marked it up and they passed it. I don't talk about crypto as a bipartisan issue because it's not. When you say bipartisan, you're talking about us and them. You're already talking about at least 2 different sides of the political spectrum. This is a non-partisan issue. Are there still members of primarily my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but also I've got some of mine that are still dinosaurs and want to make everything into a political issue? Sure. But in this case, this was a nonpartisan issue that managed to get out of the Senate Banking Committee, passed off the Senate floor over to the House. We've been working on this in the House, the market structure bill, stablecoin, dollar-backed stablecoins, the anti-central bank digital currency prohibition. We've been working on this for years, Hans. So unlike the Senate side, we've got a lot of institutional knowledge on the House side. They haven't worked on, this version is called the Clarity Act. That's the market structure bill, right? And they haven't worked on the central bank digital currency prohibition law as well. So those are primarily House creatures. We passed all 3 last week. Genius went right to the president's desk because it's gone through both. The other 2 went over to the Senate, and I fully expect that they'll get passed through the Senate.
What's the best vehicle, especially with the central bank digital currency act? I mean, you have a few things potentially moving. And before I go on, if I could just ask the audience kind of to keep your good private conversations, which I'm sure are super interesting, a little bit quieter so we can focus on this. So go ahead.
Actually, the Clarity Act, so it got 78 Democrat votes in the House. The Genius Act got over 100. Clarity, it shows again, it's a nonpartisan issue. This is the first time the Senate has seen it. Well, they've seen it, but it's the first time that they're dealing with it. Tim Scott's going to put out a discussion paper on their idea for market structure, which is great. They can kind of absorb this and work with it through the month of August. And when we get back in September, I think they're going to pass Clarity. But if they have ways that they might even improve it, I'm all for it. So that one I think will pass on its own.
There's a clearer path for Clarity, but the anti-central bank digital currency, are you going to need to attach that to the NDAA, to a CR?
Well, I'd ask, again, John Thune knows his people and he knows the Senate, but there's no reason why that can't pass on its own. I mean, you need 7 Democrat votes, but that isn't the issue. I think we would all agree, Republican, Democrat, other, that we do not want our government in a position to surveil us. If you could create a central bank digital currency that emulates cash, and what that means is it's open, permissionless, and private with a capital P, which they cannot do right now. If you can't make it private, it is nothing more than a surveillance tool. And Democrats, Republicans, and others in this country, that is not an American value. So I think that you can pass it on its own. But again, I leave them to handle their body. We take care of the House. In the meantime, we're going to do some other things, I understand, from our leadership. We're going to, or from the Speaker and the Majority Leader. I think the first is they're going to attach it to the National Defense Authorization Act.
Okay, so your preference then would be for the NDAA or a CR?
My preference is that the Senate just pass it as a standalone the way it is.
That doesn't happen.
But if it helps, I have no problem with it on the NDAA.
What about the CR?
What CR?
That was my question. You didn't fall into my trap. Is there going to be a CR?
We do not want a CR. In the House, by the end of this week, we will have passed 10 of the 12 appropriations bills. The Senate will show us today, and I hope all the adversarial rhetoric about we're not going to do this because you passed a rescissions bill, Chuck Schumer and company suggesting that they're willing to shut the government down now because they don't want to work on appropriations because they're mad. Okay, the voters made a decision last November. Republicans in the majority in the Senate are doing exactly what they believe the voters asked for. Now, we got to move on, and appropriations is the key. Today, we will find out they've got a vote on Milcon VA over in the Senate. If that passes, Hans, I think it's a good sign because the goal would be to get to conference with the Senate so that both bodies can work together and have a deal by September 30th.
When you listen, and this is more my job than your job, but when you listen to Senate Democrats, they're pretty clear that they are really upset and frustrated with the appropriations process. And just because they're moving forward on Milcon VA doesn't mean that they won't try to scuttle the overall process as we get closer to October.
Yeah, it's tough being in the minority. I understand that. But you don't win by being obstructionist. You don't win by just being against everything. You got to have something that you're for that you can sell. So I think that's misguided, and also it's emotional, Hans. I can't speak for the Senate, but I'll tell you in the House, people are emotional animals, and I'm unlike some in our conference who say, don't go too far. Don't say what you'll never do. Don't say what you won't do. Say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Get it out. Get it out. Let whatever the 5 stages of grief are, get them all out. And eventually you'll get to a place where, you know what, this is the best thing for my constituents and the country. This is how I'm going to vote.
I love this sort of new age emotionalism from a former hockey coach. Is this what you sort of encourage?
I grew up playing a sport where people go out and compete, and you've heard the joke. Everybody's heard the joke. I went to a hockey game. I went to a fight, and a hockey game broke out. Right? You would have this type of interaction, maybe physical, and guess what? Afterward, you're sitting down with the same guy that you might have been throwing punches with, having a beer.
So how many of your members in these tough votes, these late nights, have you wanted to put in the penalty box?
I do this. It's interesting. It's one thing to be a player, but it's another thing to be a coach. It's much harder to be a coach. And I learned when I coached for like 20 years, understand everybody on your bench. Everybody needs to have their lane and where they succeed, and try to help them be in the place where they can maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And we do the same thing with members. We try to help members. They came here to govern, Hans. They didn't come here to have somebody tell them this is what you're going to do and this is what you aren't going to do. These are adults. They have a wealth of experience. They're very talented. So what you need to do is help them. Our job in the whip's office, if you're a member, is to help you get what you need to do the best job you can do for your constituents. And I only give them 2 rules. The first rule is you take care of your people at home first. Okay. Nobody in Washington, D.C. elected you. So you take care of the people who put you here first. Second, you take care of yourself. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be here long. If you can do those 2 things, we can figure out how to be a team.
Is it harder or easier to whip with a 3-seat majority?
Well, as a hockey player, I hope people will understand it's much easier. I don't have to count so many people. So
Okay.
no, it has different dynamics. I was here when we had 247. There was more division when you have 247 because I think some people feel like they're not part of the process. And it's not ideal, but not for the reasons you might think. It's not ideal to have a 1, 2, 3 seat majority because people have lives. People have things going on at home. They have illnesses. They have deaths in the family. There are things they have to attend to. So attendance is always an issue. You got to make sure that you can get everybody here. But in terms of the number, the key is involving people in the process at the beginning, allowing them to be part of the process. You don't always get everything you want, and you're not able to stop everything you want to stop. But as long as you have had that involvement and you feel as though your value has been included, it's much easier to get to where we need to go.
I'm glad you brought up process because it seems right now the House is paralyzed on process over these Epstein amendments that keep getting offered in rules. How are you going to unstick that?
This is totally an issue that is a non-issue. You guys are making it an issue, and not you, Hans, but the media. It's kind of funny. If it was so important, then why weren't Democrats clamoring for this for the 4 years under Biden? Right now, you got to look at this in, first off, the president has asked the Justice Department to release all credible evidence that is releasable. Second, Pam Bondi has a motion currently pending before the court asking for permission to release even sealed information. Third, for me, as a lawyer, we are the legislative branch. We are not the judicial branch. The judicial branch will make that decision, and then we'll go from there.
But the House does investigations. There's clearly a call for more transparency. Would you like to see more transparency on the Epstein files?
Our president has already said that he wants that, and the Oversight Committee yesterday did issue a subpoena, as far as I understand. So that's proceeding.
Okay. We're basically talking about the challenges of a tight majority. There's this, and for those of you that don't know, in 2022, you were the head of the NRCC, helped win the majority. There's this big debate in the party about redistricting, on whether or not to go big and to have maybe more seats, so maybe a healthier majority if you go after some of those districts in southern Texas with mid-cycle redistricting. Where are you on the general debate on whether or not you'd rather have a bigger majority in the House, even if it means having tighter margins in individual districts?
First off, if you have me put my campaign hat on, now we get into the partisan side of it, because I like to win when it comes to campaigns. And yes, I ran the NRCC in the 2020 cycle when everybody in this town predicted we were going to lose as many as 24 seats, and we beat 12 Democrats. While everybody else was losing on the Republican side, we were winning. And then we finished that job in 2022 to take back the majority. When it comes to this redistricting thing, what's being missed in the story is the goal on the other side. Barack Obama and Eric Holder have been brilliant at this for a decade. Sue till it's blue. I mean, whether it's Pennsylvania, whether it's Wisconsin, you name your state, North Carolina, they've been doing this for years. The fact that the state of Texas, and this is a state-based system, so what I say really doesn't matter. The governor of Texas is the one that put it on the agenda for the special session. So you'd have to ask the governor and the actual representatives in Texas, the elected representatives, what is it that they're seeking to accomplish and why?
Do you hear any squeamishness or nervousness from members that, yes, you may increase the majority, but boy, in an off year, they could have some tough races?
I know from history that whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, because you've got some serious efforts on both sides over the years, which is why this gerrymander argument's so interesting. You look at Illinois, there's a district in Illinois that's like a thin line that runs through the middle of the state. Look, the redistricting is a fact of life in every state, every 10 years. And when you move population, when you move lines, which takes in some and excludes others, you're going to change the demographic makeup of that district. And It can have a positive effect in the short term. It can have a negative effect in the long term, or vice versa.
We're talking about majorities, retirements. Today we just learned that Mike Lawler is going to be running again in that Westchester County district, tough district to hold on to. There's some chat that Bill Huizenga is not going to run for the Senate. What would be your line to Huizenga if he's considering actually running for the House again, or just calling it quits and hanging up his spurs?
Well, Bill's a good friend, and in many cases, I consider him a mentor. Bill's been around as a staffer. He's been a representative for years. He's incredibly valuable to the team. He's one of the most important members on our House Financial Services Committee, but his impact goes way beyond that. So I'd be encouraging him to stay with it for at least another term or two, because we're doing big things, and he's part of it. But look, everybody in their career, whatever time they're at, we've got other members that family pressures, other issues, that's up to them. I'm going to encourage all of them. Stay with us, especially Bill Huizenga. We need leaders like Bill.
Okay. We're past time. We're going to do a quick speed round, series of questions. What's harder, coaching youth hockey or getting to 218?
Coaching youth hockey. And by the way, it's not coaching, it's the parents. Go ahead.
Okay. We don't do hockey, but I agree with you as a dad who has kids who play sports. Best friend on the other side of the aisle?
Well, there's a number that I would point to, but I like Steny Hoyer a lot. He is a good man.
Who is more likely to be president, Amy Klobuchar or Tim Walz?
Bugs Bunny.
Do you respect Klobuchar as a retail politician?
I do. I think she's one of the best. Absolutely. Amy is one of the absolute best. In fact, I would argue that she, as the best politician in Minnesota, that's somebody that we're always chasing.
Okay. Does President Trump have any interest in hockey, and will he ever go to a
Only when the U.S. and Canada are playing, yes.
Ice fishing or open water fishing?
Now you've just given me two different worlds. That's like saying, Florida or Montana. I mean, I really enjoy ice fishing, which I haven't gotten a lot of time to do the last few years because of the quiet, right? It's you sit in an ice house. I don't usually get to sit in the nice ones. It's 4x8 sheets of plywood that no windows, and you're in there out of the wind, and it's just quiet. You can hear the ice cracking. It's a great experience. You do a lot of good thinking, soul searching.
Isn't that a bad feeling when the ice is cracking?
No, it's a good thing. It tells you it's alive. Things are moving. Fish are coming.
Final question, who's a more patient fisherman, you or your wife?
Oh, God. No, it's not even that. Who's better? I can be fishing all day. We used to do this with her grandfather. I'd be out with her grandfather, who fished until he died with a cane pole and would pull out 2, 3, 4 pound walleye, right? I would catch nothing. My wife would come out in the paddle boat just to check on us. She'd drop a line in and pull out a 2 pound walleye within like 20 minutes. It sucked. It really sucked.
Well, with that great sort of fishing reality, I appreciate your time, Congressman. And everyone, please give a hand, and we'll have our next guest come up. Thanks again.
Thanks, Hans.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Axios congressional reporter Stephen Newcomb.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Newcomb. I'm a congressional reporter here at Axios. I'm also a co-author of our newsletter, Axios Hill Leaders. Get it in your inbox, 7 to 30, 8 p.m. each night, if you want to know about the most important things happening on Capitol Hill. For our next conversation, we're headed over to the other side of the Capitol. Please welcome Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin. Thank you, Senator. Senator, you had, I think, one of the more fun campaign, I don't know if it was a campaign event this year, but you played Call of Duty Zombies with a bunch of high school students. I tried to convince them to let us play Call of Duty up here today, and it didn't work. So we'll have to settle for talking about government funding to start with.
A lot less fun.
Yeah, less fun than that. Let's start with funding. You took a vote last night to move forward with one of the appropriations packages. Leader Schumer has said that Democrats should not be expected to play along with Republicans when it comes to funding the government at the end of the year if they continue to pass rescissions packages. How are you approaching this spending battle that's shaping up in September, and also the bills that sort of lead up to that? How are you approaching that, and what leverage do you have there?
Well, look, I mean, I think, at the end of September, we're going to have a big decision to make. We're having those constructive conversations now. All I can tell you is the last time this happened, back March 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there,
yeah.
I did not vote for it. And, if you want a bipartisan vote, you got to have a bipartisan conversation. And that is up to the majority. So looking forward to understanding what the plan is, given what's been happening on funding and the kind of radical change that's been happening as my peers give up their power, handed on a plate to Donald Trump in something that is like as basic as the US Constitution, separation of powers. So looking forward to figuring out that plan. I just can tell you what I did last time, which was if you don't reach out for my vote, you're not gonna get it.
Yeah, and obviously looming in the background of all of this is a possible shutdown at the end of September. And I think that there's a lot of folks in your party are on the record as being, vehemently opposed to a shutdown. But is that something that, as a poker piece, as a leverage piece, that should be on the table for the party in terms of dealing with Trump and Republicans?
I mean, I was a federal government employee for 17 years, so I understand what a shutdown does to delivery of services to Americans. I don't think anyone likes talking about a government shutdown. But I think, the framing that happens over and over in this town is like, what are Democrats going to do? Like, the Republicans own the White House, the Senate, and the House. If the damn government shuts down, it's because they let it and they couldn't get their shit together. So to me, this is not a conversation about, like, what are Democrats doing? This is a conversation about what the majority who owns everything in this town is going to do the bare minimum to get a bipartisan vote. You
said in an interview, I think last week, that Democrats need to get tough. I think the words you said were, suck it up, buttercup. What does a Democrat right now in this environment, in this moment, what does a Democrat who is fighting look like right now? What is that Democrat doing right now? I mean, I think, I always say this, as a new senator, right, that when I sit in rooms with elected Democrats, I really don't think the debate anymore is like progressive versus moderate. I think that's very 2018 or 2019. The debate that I see and the divide is between, people who answer the question like, Donald Trump presidency, take two. Is it an existential threat to democracy? Or is it, like Trump won, bad, but survivable if we just wait it out? And we are divided, and it mixes up who's progressive, who's moderate. Like, that doesn't matter anymore. There are people who are very moderate who believe he's an existential threat. There are people who are very progressive who are like, let's not do anything and wait for bad things to happen. And I'm in camp one. Like, Trump 2 is different than Trump 1 in many, many ways every single day. And when the tools you have aren't great, which when you're in the minority, they're not great, it is your job to then pivot and figure out what other tools you can produce, how you work together in teams. You can't play a game, you can't win a war, nothing if you don't have an offense, if you don't have a coordinated offense. And that, to me, is what I've been pushing both inside and outside my caucus. One way the party might be able to go on offense to fight back is redistricting, mid-decade redistricting. Yeah. You have, obviously, we were talking backstage, a law on the books in Michigan against it, but do you think, do you have an idea or an opinion on what is going on in Texas with the redistricting talks? But also, do you think that this is another tool that Democrats should use in their tool belt.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's pretty rare. I don't know if it's unprecedented what they're trying to do in Texas. They're trying to pick their voters, right? They're trying to redraw the lines in the middle of a decade so that they have more seats, right? It is very open and obvious. In Michigan, we felt so strongly about gerrymandering and how bad it is when politicians get to draw their own districts that we passed a constitutional amendment, wildly bipartisan, right? My swing state, we voted on that 4 years ago, and it was, or maybe 6 years ago now, and it was deeply popular. And now we have a citizens commission that meets every decade and draws the lines, and it's much more rational. It's also competitive, right? It makes sure you have politicians who compete. But I will tell you this, if they're gonna go nuclear in Texas, I'm gonna go nuclear in other places. I'm not gonna fight with one arm tied behind my back. I don't wanna do that,
Sure.
But if they're proposing to rig the game, we're gonna get in that game and fight.
Yeah. You spent time overseas in Iraq as part of the intelligence community. A Gaza hospital said yesterday that 21 children died over the last 3 to 4 days of malnutrition and starvation. You have called out the lack of aid in Gaza. You and I talked about it. You said that you heard a lot of opinions about, what you said about the situation in Gaza. Can you talk to me about the lens through which you view that situation, given your experience in Iraq? And is this something, the humanitarian crisis, is this something that Democrats should be talking more about?
Well, I think the lens for me is, we're all prisoners to our experience. So I served 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military. I grew up in a state that has a very large Jewish population and the largest Arab and Muslim American population. The personal nature of this conflict in my state just cannot be overstated. People have family, they have friends, they feel it intensely. And I think for me, what I've tried to do, and this has been one of the most difficult issues to work on in my professional career, is I've just tried to call balls and strikes on what is actually happening on the ground. I think many of my peers, my elected peers, they pick a camp and they just sit in that camp, and that's the lens in which they see everything, right? And they're not taking in new information. And I guess maybe because I was a CIA analyst, I just refuse to do that. Now, that means there's always someone in my state who's mad at me. Every single day, there's someone who thinks I should be saying more or saying less, or taking one side over the other. But I think, the statement you're talking about, I woke up after a weekend of violence for people who are looking for food in Gaza, and then the murder of another American citizen in the West Bank from, bands of roving settlers. So I think you have to call that stuff out. And for me, I think we all need to be paying attention to what's going on. And I think we're at a point where people are literally at risk of starvation. So we got to call balls and strikes on that. I will also say it is not just Democrats' responsibility to do something. And what has been a theme is that there is a perception, particularly from certain activists, that only Democrats have a responsibility. And again, if you want to protest, if you want to push this administration, push them, but you can't just hold Democrats accountable. Right now, the entire power structure of foreign policy is concentrated with the Republicans, and it is Trump's hand-picked aid organization that is not succeeding in delivering that aid. We need to call that out.
I think it's an interesting sort of group of folks who are talking about that issue in the Democratic Party right now. And I think it kind of gets to the heart of what you've talked about in your economic war plan and sort of talking about the party going forward, not being delineated along these lines of being progressive and moderate. It's folks like yourself, Chris Van Hollen, in the Senate, folks who you would consider more establishment centrist Democrats, and then obviously Bernie Sanders, folks like that who are sort of pounding the table on the humanitarian issue as well. So can you talk to me about your vision for a Democratic Party that is not delineated against the lines of progressive and moderate? What should it be centralized around?
Yeah, well, I think a perfect example of the divide that I see as someone from the Midwest and from a swing state is that we've gotten this far into a conversation and haven't talked about the economy, the cost of living, and the shrinking middle class, which is the existential moment of our time. I mean, the existential issue of our time. And if you need to feel that in ways that, maybe East Coast can understand, whatever you think of Mr. Mamdani in New York, it's hard to miss the same message from the Trump victory is the same message from, I think, his victory, which is cost of living in the economy is the driving issue for the average person. It's just not always driving the conversation among political elites. And to me, as a Michigander, we invented the middle class. We invented that concept. You could work on in an auto plant on the line and afford the car you were building and have a fishing cabin up north and go to Disneyland and the whole thing. So if you want to understand why our system is fundamentally polarized and broken right now, it's because people feel like the American dream that they believed in isn't working. It's just, I work hard, I keep my head down, I stay out of trouble, and I can't get ahead. And that's middle-class working people. It's also our recent college graduates. So I think to me, if Democrats do not understand that as the existential fight, and we do not communicate and fight for people in that way, it's going to be difficult to capture the popular imagination.
And if you agree on the diagnosis, which is the economic anxiety of the middle class, I would say that the prescriptions, at least the policy platform that you've outlined, is one that might not get a ton. It has things in it that will upset progressives. It has things in it that will upset moderates. How do you, for example, a public option? I think you talk a lot about housing deregulation to drive prices down. Obviously, that would not make progressives happy. So yes, the diagnosis you can agree about, but how do you rally support around a platform that might not have support from everyone?
Then you duke it out. I think the first order question is, what's the central fundamental issue of our time? And if we can agree on that, then we can hash out, Democrats know how to argue with each other. We can hash out what the policy prescriptions are. And there's going to be things I agree with and I don't agree with from people in my own party. Happens every day. But we got to start from what is the core problem. Now, to me, I grew up, I'm a product of a family business. I wouldn't be here if we hadn't, immigrated here, started a hot dog business and lived the American dream. So I'm not a socialist. I don't believe in everyone is guaranteed a job. There are certain things that you're not going to get me to. But understanding that we're on the same team to fight on economic issues, I could do that every day of the week.
We were talking about the possibility of August recess being canceled backstage. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is under pressure from the president to cancel the month of August recess for lawmakers to get nominees across the finish line. But if you do have this recess, do you have travel plans? Do you plan to get on the road in Michigan, across the country?
I have an entire robust August schedule in the state of Michigan that I am deeply, if you enjoyed the 70-degree weather, the rare 70-degree weather in Washington, D.C. this morning, that's our high up in northern Michigan. So, I cannot wait to get back to Michigan. And to me, that is, if you want to understand how we're going to fix things, it's not going to be from inside this place in Washington. It's going to be because people actually have their ears open on the ground for things that are changing. They hear that, and that upward pressure changes things here. So if you're not constantly in touch with people back home, you just lose your sense of what's happening. And I live on a farm. It's real different from Washington, D.C., so I'm looking forward to it.
This is my last question. As somebody who is a self-professed sort of Senate guy, believe in sort of Senate supremacy over the House. What's one thing that's better about the Senate than the House since you've been over here?
Certainly this year the House got the better schedule. I think I'll tell you one thing that is better. So I moved into J.D. Vance's old office. And so when you're a new senator, you get to, like bring in your own, stuff, your decoration or whatever. And one of the really great perks that you don't have in the House, but you have in the Senate, is you can get art and artifacts on loan from your home museums. And you can put them on display. And nothing has been more fun than decorating with some of the best art from the state of Michigan. So that's much better.
Nice. Well, Senator, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. Everyone stay tuned for a quick message from Bank of America. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Senator.
She's always the first one out there.
She's the last one to leave. Her drive is so powerful. It's crazy.
She gets up and down with ease.
We're not in it for the hardware.
We're in it to make history.
Bank of America supports everyone determined to find out what's possible in golf and in life. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America.
Please give it up for Axios congressional reporter Steph Kite.
Good morning. So good to be here with all of you. I'm Steph Kite. I'm a congressional reporter for Axios and yet another co-author of the Hill Leaders newsletter. Once again, I'm going to beg you to sign up, but I'm the last person to tell you to do that, so it's your last chance. I'm very excited to have our next conversation with a senator who's only made a little bit of news lately. It's North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis. Please help me welcome. Right. Welcome, Senator. Thanks for taking time to be with us. Your announcement that you would no longer be seeking re-election next year was big news in this town. Can you give us a little bit of behind the scenes? What was the last straw for you, the moment where you decided, no, I can't do this again?
Well, it wasn't so much a last straw. It's like everything else I've done in my life. I go through a due diligence process. I went through it when I first ran. 2014, went through it again. There was a point in time when I decided that I wasn't going to run again in 2020 cycle, and had a few discussions with people that convinced me that I probably should. And so I was going through the same process to figure out, North Carolina is a purple state. It's always hard for Republicans to win statewide. It's always the most expensive race in U.S. history. It will be again. You have to go through a process and be intellectually honest with yourself. I'm not the happy warrior type who would just run for the sake of running. I would only run if I was convinced that there was a path. So I was going through that process anyway. And there was just a moment when I was having a discussion with the president, and we've never had a really testy discussion. It's always been very respectful, that I felt so strongly about what we needed to change in the bill with respect to Medicaid, that I needed to take off the table that my election prospects would have any relationship with the extent to which I was going to stand down or otherwise change my position on something that was objectively driven. So I thought it was a good time just to tell the president that he should start looking for a replacement. And he promptly went out about 10 minutes later and said he was looking for interviews, which I think is pretty important. I want a Republican to win the state, and we got to start early to make sure we have a candidate that can win.
So did your conversation with the president come before the Truth Social post where he insinuated he was looking for?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I just texted him after his concern. I really wanted to work quietly to address some of the problems with the Medicaid portion of the bill. I had no problem with TCJA re-auth. I mean, I voted for it in 2017. Wasn't about the good parts of the bill. But I still, take all comers. Take a look at our objective analytics. Take a look at the impact on North Carolina and prove me wrong. I've been dying to be proven wrong. I would love nothing more right now than the estimates of nearly $2 billion a year coming out in 3 years instead of 2 because of the deadline are wrong. I'll take all comers. Please prove my math wrong. But this is a math equation. It's not word salad. We know how to calculate the impacts. We know what the what the funding stream from the federal government is. We know what the funding stream is through state-directed payments. Our analysis looks pretty strong, and I've yet to find anybody, even as well-resourced as the administration is, to refute it. If they do, it'll be a happy day for me.
So you've spoken a lot, both in your retirement speech and afterward, about how you have concerns that some of your colleagues on the Hill don't have a clear understanding of the impact policies have on regular Americans, working Americans. So why not stay and push for that more as a senator? Why decide, no, I need to step away?
Well, number one, I'm kind of old. I'll be 65 in August, and there are a lot of factors beyond just the policy factors. I mean, it's not like, like I was telling someone last night, it's not, I'm not dead yet, in the words of great Monty Python. I'm not going to be dead when I leave here. I can continue to play a role. It just won't necessarily be through occupying a Senate seat. But it's not like I ride off into the sunset and spend all of my time. There's only so much golf and so much hiking any human being can do that's been working with a work permit since I was 12 years old. So to suddenly step away from that, it's just not in me. I'll be working probably till I draw my last breath.
Working in politics?
I think a combination. I want to get back in business. I'd like to really do stuff that's completely devoid of politics, and then find other opportunities to really help, recruit and support good, strong, business-oriented, independent members of Congress and state legislatures. That's something I'll work on. And then policy work. We've until, again, somebody can disprove our math and our assumptions, which was pretty extensive due diligence, like the kind of work I did as a partner at Price Waterhouse. We've got to fix that. We've got to fix it for the Republican Party. We've got to fix it for beneficiaries of Medicaid.
And given you want to stay at least a little bit involved, have you spoken with the president since your announcement that you would retire?
No, we haven't. I've spoken with a number of people in this administration, and I have really great relationships with many of them. I have a disagreement with some of his advisors that I think are amateurs and don't know how to look around corners. I've made that very clear publicly, and I stand by it. I look forward to the opportunity to pointing out the specific bad advice over the course of the next year and a half that I think these folks are not speaking truth to power, and it's very dangerous when you're afraid of someone who can't fire you. I mean, I'm not even afraid of people who can fire me back in the day. I'm damn sure not afraid of somebody who can't fire me, and when I have a different opinion, I want to offer that opinion so that I'm helping the president look around corners. Quite honestly, I think some of his advisors could care less about. They're riding this wave, and they'll be ready for the next wave to advise somebody 3 years from now. I have no use for those folks. I ran for the U.S. Senate to make a difference and a positive impact for this country. Many of those people are in his circle for reasons far beyond those.
Who should the president stop listening to?
Well, I'm not going to have that discussion with anybody because I want to make it very clear. I want this president to be the most successful president in U.S. history. Why is that? I want to help every president be successful. It's why I did bipartisan bills when Biden was in there, which I was roundly criticized for and even censured. I want this president to even be more successful because he happens to be a Republican. And at the end of the day, I believe that Republican and conservative ideals are the bedrock for making this country more successful in the future. But not blindly following anybody, helping them be successful.
Yeah. Well, what are some examples of what you see as bad advice being given to President Trump?
I'm just going to go back to the one that rose to a level. Sometimes we can have a difference of opinion, right? I can have a different feeling about a nominee or a different feeling. That's where you defer. At the end of the day, the president has the right, when all things are equal, to go whichever way he wants to go. But when you get into a math equation, then just disprove my math or accept the fact that you're going down a path that is going to cause the damage that we've documented. That's where I am. But again, trust me when I tell you, nothing would be more exciting than to say you're wrong. I opened up my first meeting with the leadership of CMS and White House counsel saying, nothing would thrill me more than you to tell me I'm off by 90%. I don't have a problem with saying I got a math problem wrong. Back in the day, I very seldom did. I love math. But if I've got it wrong, I've got it wrong. I'm not one of these politicians who's going to keep on saying, no, you're, in spite of compelling due diligence to the contrary, I'm standing by my numbers. It's not the way I operate.
And just to clarify, when you're talking about math, you're talking about the estimated millions of Americans who would lose coverage, healthcare coverage?
Well, I'm looking more at the numbers, and then you can infer from that from state to state. So if you take a look at North Carolina, we estimate about a $2 billion a year net reduction in revenues between Medicaid direct payments to the states and between state-directed payments. State-directed payments do not go into the Medicaid program, but they're a critical part of making that ecosystem work, particularly in rural hospitals and rural healthcare delivery facilities. And I haven't found anybody who's refuted that. I'd love for them to, really want them to. Y'all, if any of you in the audience are convinced you can, I'll share the data analytics. I'll share everything that I did by getting 3 independent estimates from the governor's office, a Democrat, from the Legislative Fiscal Research, Republicans, and an independent hospital association. All I did was aggregate and assess those estimates. Tear them up. Prove me wrong. It would make my day.
How confident are you, or what makes you so confident that these kinds of decisions are actually coming from the people around Trump, that Trump himself isn't actually okay with some of these decisions and policies?
You know, I heard, the president may have changed his opinion, but I heard when we were in the mix that he felt more comfortable with the House version of Medicaid reform. That's the other thing. All I was promoting is moving back to the House mark, which could be managed. You know, some may have a problem with the work requirements, 20 hours a week working, 20 hours a week volunteering, or 20 hours a week in school. Really? Is that hard for an able-bodied person who has no dependents, either adult dependents or children? So I loved the reforms in the House bill. It's just amazing how that additional $200 billion in the Senate mark created what I believe is an unsustainable framework for purple states, blue states, and a couple of red states.
Yeah. Well, given your concerns about the big, beautiful bill, specifically the Medicaid, what does Trump and the Republican Party have to do to ensure that your seat doesn't get picked up by a Democrat next cycle?
Win the election next year. Now, let's back up and see what that means. It means having somebody who either wins a primary or who is selected by the Republican Party to eliminate a primary that can win in a purple state. You know, I won my 2 statewide races by combined less than 3%, about 1.4% the first year, almost 1.6% the first cycle, 1.6%. And I'm considered a right-of-center business conservative. People never, it's really funny. I appreciate that, but they probably haven't looked at my Second Amendment record, my life record, which is pretty strong. Some folks in this room, if you're on the liberal spectrum, would think I'm a fire-breathing conservative. But if you don't have somebody that has that right-of-center profile, and the Democrats have somebody who is legitimately a left-of-center candidate, then we're going to have a tough time in North Carolina.
Are you planning to campaign for whoever the Republican nominee?
Depends on the nominee.
Would you be
Obviously,
willing to...
I mean, if Mark Robinson were nominated again, we saw how that worked in the governor's race. I would not vote for the Democrat, but I would not vote for Mark Robinson. So let's let that embarrassment be a lesson to the base who didn't understand that 1/3 of the 1/3 of voters in North Carolina, 30% Republicans, 1/3 of them are that base that thought Mark was their guy, led us to one of the most embarrassing gubernatorial race outcomes in modern history. I think leisure suits were popular the last time a loss like that occurred. So that's bad execution by politicos. They should have known better.
Yeah. Would you be willing to work with Laura Trump if she decides she wants to run?
You know, they've got to decide for themselves. I'm not going to get in hypothetical scenarios, but you got to look at the reality. I don't know. Maybe things are changing, but in my experience, every midterm after the election of a president on our best day is a neutral environment. On a historical average, it's going to be a negative environment. And when you're in a state where it's probably going to be a 1.5, point spread, you don't have a lot of room for error. You got to have a candidate that's not going to make a mistake. You have to have national fundraising platform that's going to match up against the Democrats, who invariably raised, it's usually about a 60-40 split. My last race was $296 million. And about $100 million of that was in support of my campaign, or maybe 120. 180 million of it was being used to impugn my integrity and actually have so many ads on TV that my 3-year-old granddaughter at the time stopped calling me Papa and started calling me Tom Tillis. Thank God she didn't hear all the messages. She just saw Papa and Tom Tillis. So now still she's 7 years old. Hey, Tom Tillis.
That's funny. Well, you're still...
Power of advertising.
Well, you are still in the Senate. There's a lot going on. So I wanted to run through a few kind of current events, get your reaction to some of these. First of all, how important do you think it is for Congress to extend some of these Affordable Care Act tax credits that are expiring at the end of this year? Is that something?
I think it's another area where we've got to make it work, or it's another disruption to health care. And back up, one of the reasons why I felt so strongly about this Medicare is in March of 2009, long before Obamacare was passed, but we knew it was coming. I was just a newly minute freshman, or a newly minute minority whip after having been in the legislature my freshman term. I quit my job at IBM when they asked me to come back full time because I was convinced the Democrats were going to overreach and I was going to be the second Republican speaker since the Civil War. The Democrats did overreach, and I did become the second Republican speaker since the Civil War. And then Obamacare got implemented, and I was able to beat an incumbent female Democrat in a general election by 1.4 points, again, based on a bad health care implementation in Obamacare. Now let's fast forward. The subsidy, if you start having the displacement of the changes in Medicaid and then you cut those subsidies off, you're going to hit a large swath of Americans who may not have any options for health care. So even if you're not compelled by the human impact on that, you should certainly be compelled by the political impact to get that right.
So I did want to ask before we wrap, what does the Trump administration need to do to handle this Epstein saga?
Release the damn files. Look, it makes no sense to me. If one of two things is true, I believe. Either it's a nothing burger in terms of the evidence we have. Let's separate it from this guy being disgusting and what he did and the systematic trafficking of young people, minor age people for sex purposes. But the promise to release the files during the campaign was either overplayed and we got a nothing burger if the files get released, or it's something really disturbing, and that's actually even a more compelling reason to release it. And this nonsense of, well, we've got to protect the innocent witnesses, those sorts of things, that's called redaction. We do that all the time. That's sort of a fake or for a bad reason for trying to stop something that you don't want to happen. So I think the files should be released, let the light of day, let the sun shine through. And that's the best way to get past it. Otherwise, if anybody thinks that this is going to go away because the House left a day early or something, it's got to be like those zombies in The Walking Dead. Every time you think you've killed it, another one's just going to come running out of the closet after you. This is going to be an issue all the way through next year's election.
Yeah. Well, we have to leave that there. Thank you so much, Senator, for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all of you for sticking around. We have one final conversation, and I'm excited to welcome to the Axios stage Missouri Senator Josh Hawley.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I believe this is your first Axios event.
I believe it is.
Well, welcome. We're excited to have you.
It's great to be here.
So I want to kick things off because you have very recently introduced bipartisan legislation addressing AI.
I have.
Can you walk us through, give us the smart brevity version of your bill?
Well, I mean, the short version is this. Senator Blumenthal and I just introduced legislation that would give every single creator in the country, every copyright holder, and every individual American the ability to get into court and to sue AI companies that train their models on people's intellectual property without their consent or without a license, that use name, image, and likeness material of individual Americans without consent, without some form of compensation. I mean, my concern is this. I know that AI is going to be great for the companies that own it. I have absolutely no doubt about that. They're going to get filthy rich. They already are filthy rich. They're going to get richer. My question is it going to be good for your struggling young novelist? We heard from David Baldacci, the multiple New York Times bestselling author last week. You know, and he was pointing out that he probably never would have gotten a start if he had had the misfortune of beginning in the age of AI. And right now AI has, I think he's written 60 novels. AI now has stripped all of those novels. His son the other day put in an AI prompt, write a David Baldacci plot. And the AI spit back to him sort of a summary of all of his plot lines. He was like, how would I have ever gotten started? So we need to protect young creators, we need to protect ordinary Americans and their material, and we've got to give them the ability to do that by getting into court against these companies. So I'm sure the companies will hate it, but I think it'll be good for the American people, and that's the main thing.
Yeah. This bill caught my eye because what we've been hearing from President Trump, and we know he's making an announcement later today about the strategy towards AI, we've heard from him, we've heard from Republican leaders. The emphasis has really been on, adopting and competing in AI, and there's really a reluctance to regulate AI right now. Is that the right approach to you? What do you think of the way this is being handled?
Well, I think we've got to put the American worker and the American creator and the American individual at the center of our policy. We've got to ask a basic question. Do we want AI to work for people, or do we want people to work for AI? And I want it to be the first, that AI is in service to the American people. So look, if we can get AI to make workers more productive, fantastic. If we can get AI to help us with medical innovation, wonderful. If we can get AI to help creators rather than hurt them, that's superb. But I'm worried that's not the trend line that we're on. And if you look at how these companies are behaving, it's basically a smash and grab mentality, where they're going in and they're grabbing everything that they can get their hands on, all of the creative material, all of the name, image, and likeness material, all of the personal data, and they're not asking anybody, they're not compensating anybody, they're not even trying, they're just taking. There's something wrong with that. And I think if we continue down that road, we're going to have a major reckoning, and that's before we get to the potential mass displacement of jobs. I mean, we are looking at potentially, with this AI revolution that's being forecast, huge loss of jobs for working people, entry-level white-collar jobs. I think we better start thinking really hard about that. And again, I think we better find a way to put people at the center of our technology policy. If we don't do that, I'm worried about what that's going to mean for ordinary working Americans.
Jumping back into your concerns with AI, I wanted to know, do you feel, you seem very passionate and you have concerns about how AI could be disruptive to American people. Do you feel like you are alone in the urgency of that concern in your party right now?
Well, I hope not alone. I mean, I'm delighted that this legislation that we just introduced is bipartisan legislation. I hope that it'll have broad support in both parties. I do think that right now there's a little bit of myopia in Washington. I think there's, people are sort of covering their eyes and saying, oh, we're gonna hope for the best and not really look at the trend lines here. And I think we've got to open our eyes to the fact that sure, AI has enormous potential. Everybody agrees with that. But the question is, what is it going to be like for the working people of this country? What is it going to be like for the young creators of this country? What is it going to be like for individual Americans who don't work for a tech company? So I think we've got to face some facts here. And again, I think this is an issue. This could come to dominate our politics in the next 10 years. It really could. I mean, the way that immigration has been very central to our politics over the last decade, I really believe that AI could be, given its enormous disruptive potential. And hopefully some of that disruption will be for good, but let's face it, what we're seeing so far is a lot of the disruption is not good. It's not good for working people. And I think that if the Republican Party wants to be a party of working people, I think we better start thinking about how AI is going to affect working folks. And I think we've got a lot of work to do there.
Well, then what is your read on the fact that one of the first pieces of legislation addressing AI that has passed Congress was this moratorium on states regulating how AI is used?
Yeah, so bad. Well, we got that out of, you're talking about what was in the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, Steph, it was adjusted.
It was, yeah. So we were able to strip that out of the bill, which took some doing. But no, it's not a good sign. I mean, if you want my honest answer, I think I thought it was terrible policy. I mean, this was the 10-year moratorium that was proposed on all state regulation. It would have prevented my state, for instance, from protecting minors from deepfake pornography. I took multiple calls from governors of multiple states, attorneys general. I'm a former attorney general of Missouri, attorneys general of multiple states who called me on this and said, this would be a disaster for our state laws. You're telling us we cannot protect minor children in our states. You're telling us that we can't stop suicide bots online. That would have been the effect of that law. So, now the AI industry really pushed hard for that moratorium. They lost. And when we had to vote on it on the floor of the Senate at the 28th hour of our vote-a-rama, it lost 99-1. I mean, 99 senators voted to overturn that moratorium. So I think that shows that the American people, the public, is very, very skeptical and frankly very, very worried about the AI trend line here. And I think we better be responsive to that because their concerns are legitimate, they're real, and frankly, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the big, beautiful bill, I do have to ask, you repeatedly for months told me, other reporters publicly, that you would not vote for a bill that included Medicaid benefit cuts.
Correct.
You then voted for the big, beautiful bill that does include future Medicaid cuts. Then, days later, introduced a bill that would strip those same cuts that you had voted for. How is that not confusing to your voters?
Well, first of all, there's no benefit cuts. I said I would not vote for any benefit cuts, any cuts that would result in reduction of benefits in the state of Missouri, of which there are none in this bill. So you might remember, I'm sure you do, you covered this. Many of my colleagues wanted to change the so-called FMAP, the funding formula, from the federal government to the states. And what I heard over and over again from officials in my state was, if you do that, if you change the FMAP formula, that will result in benefit reductions in the state of Missouri. I said I will not vote for that, and that is not in the bill. There are no changes to the FMAP in the bill. There will be no benefit reductions in the state of Missouri on Medicaid whatsoever. Now, I'm in favor of the work requirements and always have been. I'm in favor of the anti-fraud provisions. I'm in favor of getting illegals off of Medicaid. I was always in favor of those. I'm fine with that. The only
provider taxes was
right. So the only other part of the bill as passed that concerns me is there are now in the future, we were able to get it delayed, but in the future, changes to the hospital funding, to the provider tax funding. So my view is this. I think we ought to be funding rural hospitals more, which is why we got a $50 billion rural hospital fund. I had to negotiate for that, but we got that in the bill. Missouri's going to get $1 billion in new hospital funding. But you're right, Steph, in the future, in 2030 in my state, there will be a reduction in the hospital funding formula, essentially the provider tax. I'm opposed to that, and I always have been. When I said I'm going to vote for the bill, I said, listen, I like a lot of it. I don't like all of it. I'm going to try to undo the parts I don't like. And for me, I think we shouldn't change the provider tax.
But do you believe that the provider tax change, as has been estimated, would result in people losing coverage?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the issue, I don't think it would result in people losing coverage. The issue would be, what effect would it have on hospitals, rural hospitals? The provider tax formula doesn't have to do with individual benefits, which was always a red line for me. It has to do with how hospitals are funded. But that's vitally important. And my concern is that, what result would it really have? I mean, would it force us in Missouri, for example? Would it force us to go out and find new funding in other places? Would it force us to raise taxes in some areas? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to risk it. I don't want to take the experiment, which is why I propose now legislation that would double the size of that rural hospital fund and would end the changes to the provider tax. We got the provider tax changes delayed. My view is we shouldn't do them at all.
Okay. Some of the Affordable Care Act tax credits are set to expire at the end of the year. How important do you think it will be for Republicans to stop that from happening?
Well, if we don't, the cost of insurance is just going to explode for families, working people across the nation. I mean, already we're seeing the premium increases are unbelievable. We're looking anywhere from 10 to 30% increases in the cost of health insurance. These subsidies allow folks to pay less than sort of 10% of their income, which is still a lot, by the way, on health insurance. If we don't do something about that, we could see people paying double what they're paying now. I just don't know how you'd afford it. I don't know how working people are going to afford it. And this gets back to the cost of healthcare. Healthcare is unbelievably expensive. And the reason so many people are on Medicaid in Missouri, 1.3 million people are on Medicaid. That's over 20% of my state. We're not a huge state. Over 20% are on Medicaid. Why is that? It's because many of them don't get health insurance on the job, and they can't afford it on the exchange. So we've got to do something both to preserve access to people who are not getting health insurance on the job, but also to bring down the cost of health care for everybody. I mean, as a working family, again, I just don't know how the people aren't making it. That's the problem. So we have to do something about it.
Yeah. So you've long been, a populist. We have J.D. Vance in the White House now. There's a lot of conversation around populism in the GOP. But still, you seem to take things a step further. You're introducing bills to raise the minimum wage. You're signing on to legislation with, progressives like Elizabeth Warner and Bernie Sanders. Do you feel that the Republican Party is actually moving in your direction? Do you feel more at home, or do you feel that you're still kind of maybe on an island?
Well, I feel like I'm representing the people of my state. I mean, that's my number one responsibility. I'm the senator from Missouri. I'm here to represent the people of Missouri. I have a working class state. The issues that I talk about are the issues that matter to my state. I think in terms of the Republican Party, I think voters have been trying to send the Republican Party a message for a number of years now. I think it's why the president won the primary back in 2016. Who was the one person on that stage of, what was it, 16, 17 candidates back then?
A lot.
And, who was the one person on that stage that would talk about reshoring jobs, who would talk about tariffs, protecting them? Protectionism was a dirty, dirty word back then, still is in many quarters of the Republican Party, but Trump stood on that stage unabashedly and said, no, actually, I do want to protect American jobs. No, actually, I do want to raise the wages for blue-collar workers. Our base listened to that and said, yes, that's the message that we're trying to send. And I think if you look at the election returns from this last election, working class people, blue collar folks, voted for Donald Trump. But, does that mean that they're in the Republican Party to stay forever? No, I don't think so. It means they're giving the Republican Party a shot. So my view is we've got to deliver with real policies that help working people, whether it's AI, whether it's healthcare, whether it's taxes. You go down the list. We've got to do something for working folks. We should raise the minimum wage. It's one of the best things we could do for blue-collar workers. There hasn't been a minimum wage increase in 16 years now. The minimum wage, adjusted for inflation, is at its lowest level since the 1950s, the federal.
What changed for you on that? In 2018, when you were running, you were opposed to raising the minimum wage in your state.
Right. And what changed for me was the voters of my state voted overwhelmingly in 2018, and then we voted again, by referendum, by the way. This wasn't the state legislature. By referendum, we voted twice to raise the minimum wage. Our minimum wage in Missouri, as of this coming January, will be $15. And what I proposed is, let's do for the nation what we did in Missouri. And what I did is I listened to my voters, and I also just looked at the facts. And I looked and saw, blue-collar workers are not getting a pay raise. Corporate CEOs, no offense to anybody who's a corporate CEO in the room or those funding this panel, but corporate CEOs have gotten raise after raise. Corporate pay, CEO pay, is up like 100% over the last decade. Blue-collar workers' wages are flat, and not just for the last decade, but for the last 30 years. I mean, we have to do something about that. Is the minimum wage the end of that discussion? No, of course not. But it is a good place to start, and I think it's overdue.
Well, given the trends that you pointed out in 2016, last election cycle, do you think the Republican Party is ready for a populist like you in 2028?
Not me, but I think that we have got to, over the next few years, with this president who ran and won on a populist agenda, we have to deliver on that agenda. And I often look at the example of the Tories in the UK, who won a huge landslide a couple of elections ago, one of their biggest landslides in their history, and now they're in the minority. Why is that? Well, they didn't deliver for the people who elected them. Working class people elected them, and they didn't deliver for them. I would just say to my Republican colleagues, we're going to be in that same position unless we deliver for working people. That's why we need to cut working people's taxes. We need to lower the cost of their health care. We need to raise their wages. We got a lot of work to do.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have today, Senator. Appreciate your time. Thank you to all of you who joined us in person and on the live stream. Thank you to Bank of America for making this happen, and for the Axios Live team who works so hard to pull off these amazing events. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and we hope to see you next time.